Story title: Experienced a car crash this morning that didn't actually happen. Author name: Alexang That. So I don't really know how to explain this, or if it even fits on this sub, or even what actually happened if I'm being honest. But regardless, I'll try to relay the story. I was driving to work this morning, and I'm coming up to a side street that connects to a very busy road in my area. It's the main road that stretches through like 20 towns. I get to the red light at this main road and sit there for about 15 seconds before seeing a car pull up behind me. As the car comes up to a complete stop behind me, my eyes drift from my rearview mirror to the stoplight in front of me. It was still red. I then look down to my radio clock and it says 7:36, and this is going to sound strange, but for a period of time, that time seemed to stretch out until infinity. I kind of felt like this intense pressure all around me, like I was zoned out and couldn't clear my head or move my body, because I was obsessed with the numbers I was seeing, like I was in a trance or something, and it wasn't silent around me, but it was at the same time. Like very, very loud, pressing silence. I couldn't move, but I also wasn't trying to move, almost like I was paralyzed with fear, but I knew I was frozen, but couldn't really process it or try to move. I don't know, I really can't explain it. Even now it's so confusing and contradictory. After who knows how long of being stuck in this trance, suddenly everything snaps back to normal. Instantly. The very first thing I register is that the person behind me is laying on their horn. I look up and see the light is green. I begin to drive forward, feeling completely 100% normal again. And once I get into the middle of the intersection, I sense this large presence to the right. Correction, left, of me. I turn my head to look out of my driver's side window, just in time to see a huge truck coming right at me. It hits me and I could feel my body break. I felt and heard so many of my bones get absolutely crushed. Suddenly I'm upside down in my car, in so much pain I can hardly breathe, covered in glass, and I can hear someone screaming. The last thing I remember before I passed out about 10 seconds later was seeing cop lights and distinctly thinking to myself, wow, how did they get here so fast? This is important. The next thing I remember, I open my eyes and I'm sitting in my car at the red light. The intense pain I felt a moment ago is fading fast, but it's still there. Only almost like a ghost or echo version of itself, if that makes sense. I am intensely confused at this point, and I start looking around in a panicky way, and my eyes trail across the clock again. It says 7:36, and I'm beyond confused. I know it wasn't a daydream. It was so goddamn real. I'm frozen in place, staring at the clock, trying to figure out what the fuck just happened. After about 5 or 10 seconds, I hear the person behind me start to beep at me, but I'm shaking and about to cry, and so overwhelmed with leftover fear that I can't even react to it. They start to lay on their horn and I still can't move, because I'm just so confused and frightened. Now at this point, I'm starting to calm myself down and trying to rationalize what happened. I was beginning to convince myself that it had to have just been a daydream. It was early enough and I was tired enough that I even started to think I just nodded off at the red light and dreamt the crash. What the hell else could have happened, right? If it weren't for what happened next, I probably would have been able to go the rest of my life believing I had fallen asleep and dreamt it. The moment the clock turned 7:37, like the very second the numbers changed, a huge truck comes barreling through the light, definitely speeding. They ran the red light and crossed right in front of my car. A few seconds later, a cop, who must have been driving behind the truck in the first place, runs the red light as well, turning on his lights in the process and beginning to pursue the speeding truck. They both drove out of my view within a few seconds. I was so shaken, I just pulled my car to the side of the road, right where I was, and sat there in silence for I don't even know how long. Like, what normal explanation could I possibly come up with for this? There isn't one. I hadn't seen the truck or the cop car before they ran the red light in front of me. So how did the dream crash I had include those very specific and very real details? The entire area I live in is covered in trees, so it's not like I can see very far down the road in either direction. I know for a fact I did not see the truck or the cop car before I experienced the crash. I'm still just so shaken. How do I rationalize this experience to myself? I feel disillusioned by something, but I don't even know what. I feel like I'm going crazy. I just needed to share this with people who won't automatically dismiss this as a hallucination or a dream. Personal thoughts. Right, let's jump in right away and say that I'm glad you're okay. But the thing is, you probably weren't in a different timeline or a different parallel universe. This is a strange effect, or hypothesis, known as quantum immortality. Basically, it postulates that there are many versions of ourselves, almost infinite versions, occupying different parallel universes that are similar to ours. Well, some are, and some aren't. But there are many versions of you. And if in one timeline you would die, then your consciousness maybe jumps to a different one, or rather just becomes aware and occupies a different one in a different timeline. Now, you may not actually know this happened outside of this kind of premonition you had, which may not have been a premonition. Maybe you actually did die, and then you just echoed over to a different timeline. The fact that you still felt yourself being hurt, your bones broken, even after you made this jump, quote unquote, leads me to think that that's probably what happened. If it was a guardian angel situation, I don't think you would have felt anything after you awoke from the premonition. It was almost like a delayed effect. Your brain was still processing from the transition. So I would say, have you noticed anything odd about, well, anything in life? Even tiny things. Like where someone you know normally puts, the remote for the TV, or maybe their favorite meal changed. Any tiny thing that's changed, even if it's small, maybe especially if it's small. If it's odd, if it's out of place, well, that would provide even more evidence that this is what happened. Now, I wouldn't say I rule out guardian angel entirely. Perhaps there is some force looking out for you and it just wasn't your time to go. But usually those don't involve dreams, not like this. Usually they just involve surviving in ways that don't seem possible, not knowing exactly what was going to happen and then avoiding it. I know I like that hypothesis, so I am a bit biased. Keep that in mind. The idea that you just have so many copies of yourself, almost like a video game with extra lives, that you can just keep on going. I mean, I wouldn't test this out and be reckless, but hey, if it's true, that's pretty cool.